Between Two Mounds. I am Janfer Aronson. My message is for the great Jarl of the Golden People, the one whose honour burns with the fire of the sun. Juanita stared at the Goldie. She wasn't tall, but looked lithe and muscular, like she knew how to handle herself. Despite that, the only weapon she carried was a short carving knife secured at her belt. Not a thrall then, but not a warrior either. She tilted her head to one side to bring her face closer to Shiraj. "Who are the Golden People?" she whispered to the Hakima. The Jotun could probably hear them. The tent wasn't that large, but Juanita wasn't sure that she cared. "I think it's their name for us. Probably meant to be a compliment," he whispered back, and shrugged to show he was none the wiser. "Who is this great Jarl, then?" Juanita called out. The Jotun called their leaders Jarls, so presumably the orc meant Demiro. More compliments, maybe. "Their honour is a flame that illuminates the night. Their words are glass that hide nothing. The dust from which they come is more precious than the stars." "I want a name, not a resume," Juanita cut in. The Goldie might be making every effort to be diplomatic, but there was only so much of this honour crap she could put up with. She had better things to do with her day than listen to the Jotun people prattle on about their honour. The Goldie paused for a moment. A flicker of doubt crossed her face. For the first time since the two had come face to face, Juanita thought she looked unsure of herself. "Ustigar warned me not to speak the name of the Golden Jarl, lest they come to harm thereby," she eventually responded. Juanita gave a sardonic laugh. "If you want me carrying your messages, Jotun, you'll do me the courtesy of telling me who they're for. Otherwise, this is going to be a very short meeting for both of us." If the Goldie heard the threat at the end, she paid it no heed. "The Golden Jarl knows that our people honour them. If you pass my word to your Jarls, then the Golden Jarl will hear me and know my king's message is for them." That last bit finally got Juanita's attention. She sat up straight in her chair and eyed the Goldie warily. "Somebody fetch a scrivener," she barked at the room. If this orc really did have a message from the Jotun king, then it might just be important. Overview. The Empire has fought with the Jotun orcs for as long as anyone can remember. The conflict has become much more bitter since the Battle of Orchard's Watch in spring 381 YE, when the Empire used powerful curses to wreak devastation on the Jotun armies and the inhabitants of the Morn, both Imperial and Jotun alike. Years of conflict ensued, a campaign that seems to never end and one in which the tide of war has only recently turned in the Empire's favour. Some Imperial negotiators have pushed the Jotun to consider the possibility of peace. The representative of the King and Queen, Jarl Ustigar of Kirheim, has repeatedly rebuffed these negotiations on behalf of the two monarchs. He claims that the Jotun cannot make even temporary peace with the Empire while those whose honour was stained by the deaths in the Mournworld still live. Few really understand Jotun notions of honour, but it appears that there can be no peace until those who failed the thralls of the Morn have found their own death in battle. Now, after 4 years of war, the first tiny cracks may at least have appeared in the Jotun's resolve. Last season, the Empire won a decisive victory against the Jotun, whose champions fought to the death to hold Fort Braden. Such an action is unusual. Normally the Jotun fight until the battle is lost and then withdraw. This time the Jotun champions were apparently given leave to remain so that they may fight their way across the Howling Abyss. After the battle was done, the Freeborn elected to raise a great mound of stones over the bodies of the fallen, out of respect for the Jotun traditions. Following the erection of the mound, from out of the west comes a young Goldie offering, if not an actual olive branch, then at least the possibility of one. Meanwhile, in the north, Wintermark's armies lead the charge into Tromsø, taking the war deep into the heart of Jotun territory. In recent years, the armies of Wintermark have committed themselves to fight with honour against the Jotun. Whether out of respect for their enemies, or a reflection of their own heroism, is unclear. Regardless, it seems that too is reaping dividends, with the Jotun armies finally responding in kind. Following that decision comes a second envoy from the Jotun eager to talk to the generals or their representatives. And this time, they come with a request from the Jotun. Dust, flame and glass. The Freeborn Assembly took the decision to raise a burial mound to honour the funeral traditions of the Jotun who died at Fort Braden. Despite initial grumbling, the Jotun champions are buried and a mound raised without incident. A month later, a Jotun Goldie appears in the area to study the mound. Battle at Braden's Yassi was hard fought, and we honour the courage of those who remained behind to face us. We send Maria y Esprit y Aguera with 25 doses of Liao and 5 thrones to urge the people of Caraman to raise burial mounds over the dead Jotun. Our traditions are what define us. We believe all should be offered the opportunity to follow those traditions, especially in death. Maria y Esprit y Aguera, Freeborn Assembly, Summer Solstice 385 YE, upheld 150 votes to 16. The victory at Fort Braden left the Freeborn with a moral quandary: how to deal with the bodies of the slain Jotun champions who gave their lives in defence of the keep. The Freeborn tradition is to burn the bodies of the dead, but there were some that argued that the coast didn't even owe them that much and suggested the bodies should be looted and left for carrion. In the end, calmer voices prevailed, and Maria y Esprit y Guerra convinced the Freeborn Assembly to raise a great burial mound for the dead, to honour the slain in the traditional Jotun way. The decision was not entirely popular, not simply because it involves a lot of back-breaking work, but because few people are minded to be so charitable towards the Jotun that have brought nothing but war and death to Caraman. Maria is unfaltering in her leadership, and those her words cannot persuade are swayed by the pouch of thrones that she carries. Within a week, the work is done. A great mound is raised over the bodies of the slain. Afterwards, even the most recalcitrant freeborn who took part in the work seems to admit that it was probably the right thing to do. Few think any more of the matter, but a month later, word spreads of a lone orc seen in the vicinity of the burial site. A scouting party is quickly formed to seek out this threat. The orc proves remarkably easy to find, having set up a large hide tent in a copse near the mound. The search party confront her. She confirms that she is indeed a Jotun, but she claims to be a Godi, a Jotun priest, who has come here to mark the mound of the fallen. In person she is surprisingly congenial, and swears on her honour and her ancestors that she means no harm to any freeborn. She repeats that she is only here to study the mound, and to discern how it should be marked. A handful of hot-tempered youth argue to kill the priest on the spot. She is an enemy, and she has not come under a flag of truce. But Maria's words still carry weight. Surely it cannot bring any harm to allow one unarmed Jotun to come to the mound. The assembly urged the freeborn to respect the traditions of Jotun in death, and so, reluctantly, they agreed to let her stay, at least until somebody who knows what should be done with this strange priest can be found. Of course, the freeborn are not such fools as to let an enemy wander around their lands unwatched once they know they are there. Hence, the local families take on the burden of checking each day to see what the Jotun priest is up to. She seems as good as her word. Every morning she goes up to the mound, where she seems to spend an hour or two in meditation or prayer of some kind. She is clearly engaged in some kind of religious ceremony, but there is no sign of any magic being performed. She leaves the mound after midday and spends the rest of the time gathering fruit, wild vegetables, and checking on some simple snares for food to supplement the meagre ration she has brought with her from the west. Within a week, her presence has become mundane, and people are already beginning to wonder if their vigil is really worth the effort, and how long they will have to keep it up. Not long, as it turns out. A few days later, the Godi appears to be done, or at least the first part of her endeavours is complete. Before she departs, she asks to meet with one of the yokel Jarls so she might pass on 2 requests to the Golden Jarl. After some discussion, she is escorted to the presence of one of the local Demiros, Juanita Irorio Iroqueza. Once there, she claims to be speaking for Godmundir Aronson, King of Narkist, Jarl of Jarls, with a question for the freeborn generals and a petition for the Golden Jarl to consider. Enduring Flame. On behalf of the King of Narkist, the Godi petitions the Golden Jarl for permission to raise a monument on the burial mound. She intends to fashion a mithril bowl to sit on top of the mound, and plans to bring 9 wains of mithril here to create a permanent monument shortly after the autumn equinox. The Freeborn Assembly could use a simple mandate to prevent the Godi from placing the monument on the mound. The Demiro of the Cinnabar Hills could use a winged messenger to arrange a raid into Liathavan to capture the Godi and the mithril. The Godi claims that the people of Glass, Fire and Dust have honoured the king's champions with their labour, but the work is incomplete. For their ancestors to accept the fallen, they must know that the champions died fighting a worthy foe, an honourable enemy who defeated them with sword and spear in honest battle. The Jotun are grateful that the bodies have been lain to rest, but the mound contains no symbol to mark the honour of the people who defeated them. Thus, she wishes to raise a monument to the virtue and honour of the freeborn people who defeated her champions. To that purpose, she plans to return in 2 months' time, a few weeks after the autumn equinox. If the Golden Jarl will grant her permission, she will fashion a great bowl of mithril, Once complete, she will invoke the power of the Jotun ancestors to fill the bowl with fire, such that it will burn day and night. She has consulted the omens and believes that this is the best way to convey the strength and honour of the freeborn who defeated them. If the Jotun are allowed to complete the mound in this way, then the ancestors will know that their people were slain in honourable battle and will recognise that they died fighting a worthy foe. The request raises a lot of questions, some of which the Godi is able to answer, some of which they do not. Their plan for the bowl is large. She aims to use 9 wains of mithril to construct the monument. She and her fellow Jotun will bring the mithril with them when they return. There will be no magic in the bowl. She claims it will burn by the wishes of the ancestors alone, though she does admit that her skills as a Godi allow her to craft such a thing. It will need no fuel, nor anyone to tend the fire. She swears on her honour and her ancestors that it will bring no harm on anyone that dwells anywhere in Karaman or beyond. There are 3 obvious ways the Brass Coast could respond to this request. The Godi seems to need nothing more than the Empire's permission, so they could simply let her proceed with her plans. If nothing else happens, then the Godi will return after the Equinox and raise a monument to the freeborn over the burial mound of the fallen Jotun champions. And that, on the face of it, will be the end of the matter. Alternatively, if the freeborn have no desire to permit the Jotun to treat their lands like a personal memorial ground, then the Assembly could enact a simple mandate to ensure that the people turn back the Jotun when they arrive. There is no garrison here now that Fort Braden is gone, but the families are confident that they are more than a match for a few dozen Jotun. Be alert to all dangers within and without. We send named priest with 10 doses of Liao to urge the families of Karaman to ensure that the Jotun are turned back from our borders. We have honoured their dead, now let them learn to honour our borders and stay in their own land. Synod Mandate, Freeborn Assembly. If this mandate is passed, then Juanita and the other Demiros will be ready for the Jotun when they arrive. There won't be violence unless the Jotun start it, but they will be turned back and told in no uncertain terms that the Golden Jarl refuses their request to decorate the funeral mound in Braden's Yassi. That is not the only alternative. A small group of unarmed Jotun are planning to come here in less than a month's time with 9 wains of mithril. That mithril could be used to enrich Karaman, or forged into weapons and armour to fight the Jotun. The coast has not agreed to this request of the Jotun. They didn't ask this Godi to turn up here, but she's apparently coming anyway. They could put together a raiding party, attack the Godi while she is travelling through Liathavan, and take the mithril. Juanita Irorio Irakeza is more than happy to carry out the deed. If she receives a winged messenger from the Demira of the Cinnabar Hills, she will gather a group of Corsairs and Kohan, and they'll carry out a lightning raid into Liathavan to capture the Godi and the mithril they're carrying. Position of the Demira is up for election at this summit. Whoever claims the title can get the mithril, and then somebody will have to decide how best to ransom the Godi back to the so-called King of Jotun. She should be worth a hefty sum though, given her name. Winged Messenger Address. Juanita Irorio Irakeza, the Rorio Family Estates, Braden's Yassi. A handful of dust. The King of Narkist wishes to know why the freeborn have sullied their honour in recent battles, yet now they honour the Jotun fallen. The Godi claims there can be no hope of peace between the freeborn and Jotun if they choose to fight without honour. The King of Narkist's Godi has a second message, one for the collective generals of the freeborn. The Godi says that the king does not understand why the freeborn have honoured his champions in this way, yet permit the corrupted slaves of the king in chains to sully their honour by taking the field with them. These twisted creatures' one singular delight is slaughter and brutality. The Jotun expect the imperial Druge to crawl on their bellies before the throne of the bound king, but they do not understand why the freeborn would sully their souls by embracing this monster as their ally. The Godi claims that the Jotun have had many years of honourable battle with the freeborn who they see as honest enemies. The words of the Golden Jarl sent to Ustigar 4 winters past gave King Gormander hope that there may one day be a chance for a break from war between the Jotun and the freeborn. The Golden Jarl claimed that the freeborn would reject cruel strategies, and the king noted that since that time her Redwind Corsairs have fought with honour and chosen to ransom those they have defeated. Since that time, the freeborn have faced the Jotun as equals on the battlefield. But now their generals have called on the power of winter, so that their warriors could fight like rabid dogs. Where is the honour in victory such as this? The generals give the orders to their soldiers to show mercy to those who are defeated, but then march to war alongside the carrion knights of the Bound Three, whose only delight is murder and bloodshed, and who slaughter those who fall on battle, and the healers who try to save them. The king had assumed that the Golden Jarl was dead, and that freeborn honour had died with them. It would not be the first time in recent years that the Empire had abandoned its words, and turned to forbidden arts and murder of thralls to achieve victory on the battlefield after all. But just when they had abandoned all hope of peace with the Empire, the freeborn chose to honour the king's champions and raise a barrow for the dead with their own hands. This suggests that the Golden Jarl still lives, and that the freeborn can still act with honour. The king and his Jarls are confused by this contradiction. They have spoken with Jarl Ustigar, who knows the Imperials better than any Jotun, and he cannot explain it. They have exchanged messages with Queen Yrsa, and she is none the wiser. They have consulted the omens and cannot discern what motive is guiding the freeborn's hands. Thus, the king of Narkist has sent his Godi to ask the freeborn why they have done these things. Do the freeborns still hope for a pause in the fighting? The Jotun are born to war. There can never be a lasting peace between the Jarls and the Empire, but even the Jotun weary of fighting eventually. Even the ancestors do not demand their people live only to fight. The king cannot stop the war until the disgrace of those who allowed the Empire to murder the thralls of the Mournwald has been wiped clean, and that can only happen when every single Jotun who fought there is dead. That is why he gave his champions permission to remain behind at Fort Braden. But surely the freeborn generals understand that if they pursue this path, allying themselves with dark powers, invoking forbidden magic, sullying the battlefield with brutal and callous murder, then it is only a matter of time before there is another tragedy like the Mournwald, and that will mean another decade of war. No one can fathom the purpose of these mixed messages, and so the king of Narkist has sent his Godi to ask, why are you doing this? Why would the freeborn fight like the Druge on the battlefield, and then raise a burial mound to cover the bodies of those who had fallen? The Godi does not offer to take a response. She claims the freeborn have 15,000 ways to reply to the king of Narkist, if they so choose. 3 tiers entwined. The new Jarl of Tromsø and the old Jarl of Kirheim have sent envoys to the Imperial war host gathered in Tromsø. After the death of Jarl Olgaf Anargesson and the defeat of Matilda Fisher's forces, the new Jarl of Tromsø, Jarl Inga Olgafsdottir, sends word that she wishes to parley with the Imperial armies. A truce is arranged to allow the generals or their representatives to meet with the Jotun, and an Imperial delegation has a short negotiation with the Jarl of Tromsø and the Jarl of Kirheim. The Jarl of Tromsø refuses to surrender her castle or her lands. She is clear that she and her people will fight to the bitter end to defend their land against the Empire. Instead, she proposes that her champions will face the Empire on the field of battle, so they might have an opportunity to capture Matilda Fisher. It is a strange offer, but one that seems to accord with the Jotun's peculiar notion of honour. Although the Jarl of Kirheim is much older and more senior than the Jarl of Tromsø, he refuses to speak until the Jarl of Tromsø has had a chance to finish discussing the fate of Matilda Fisher. He seems to consider that matter to be hers to deal with alone. In fact, he appears to have little interest in Matilda Fisher at all, or even the fate of her warriors, her fortification, or even her territory. Rather, the Jarl of Kirheim is here to discuss one thing: the fate of Mount Majestind, the great peak at the heart of Tromsø, which the thralls claim is the throne of the Jotun gods. The Jarl is somewhat guarded about why the mountain is so important, but is painfully clear that it is sacred to the Jotun in some way. He denies that the mountain is the throne of the gods, but he does admit that the bones of many Jotun ancestors are interred there, along with the regalia they were buried with centuries ago. It soon becomes clear that the Jarl of Kirheim has rushed north not to save Tromsø so much as to try and save the Mount Majestind. Oaths of iron and blood. The Jarl of Kirheim has asked General Iron Osric and General Loffin Bloodcloak to swear an oath before the Wintermark egregores not to permit their imperial allies to despoil Mount Majestind. If the oath is taken, the fight with honour order will prevent any imperial army in the same territory from raiding the tombs, burial mounds, and shrines to the Jotun ancestors. The Jarl is deeply perturbed by the presence of the imperial orcs, the marchers, and the freeborn in Tromsø. He claims to trust the honour of both General Osric, who he appears to be on first-name terms with, and General Loffin, confident that even if they take all of Tromsø, neither general would ever permit their people to despoil the burial chambers. He makes repeated comparisons with the marshes of Calavesa, pointing out to the Wintermarkers how devastated their people would be if the Jotun despoiled the resting place of their ancestors. He claimed the Jotun would never contemplate such a heinous crime, and how he knows that the Wintermarkers would never despoil Mount Majestind. According to Ustigar, of all the Imperials, only Wintermark can possibly understand what is at stake here. Only they can know how sacrilegious it would be, how devastating to the Jotun, and only they appreciate what would be at stake. If the bones at Mount Majestind were disturbed and the tombs looted, then it would mean that nothing was sacred anymore. Despite the Jarl's claim and diplomatic demeanour, he is careful to insinuate that if this happened, then it would absolutely mean that the marshes, which the Jotun have always considered to be sacred and untouchable, would become fair game for reprisals by enraged Jotun Ulfenvar. Still, he is absolutely certain that the Winter Markers would never do this. Sadly, his people do not have the same confidence that the Marchers, the Imperial Orcs and the Freeborn understand how important it is that nobody disturbs the rest of the Jotun ancestors. While the Jarls are relieved that the Winter Markers have not brought their Imperial Druge allies north with them, it can't be denied that the Freeborn have marched alongside knights bound in service to the King in chains. The Imperial Orcs grow closer to their ancestors each year, but the Jarls worry that they will seek out the mountains in the belief that they can steal the Jotun's ancestors from them. And the Marchers, they have done much to reclaim their honour in recent campaigns, but it is still barely half a decade since they unleashed a plague of curses on their own people in the Mournworld. Jarl Ustigar is clear that he trusts Wintermark generals with his honour, but can they say the same for their allies? He asks for Wintermark to vouch for those they have brought with them. Specifically, he asks that General Iron Osric and General Lothar Bloodcloak to swear an oath in front of their egregore not to permit their Imperial allies to despoil Mount Majestind whilst they are in Tromsø. He offers nothing in return for this plea, which he seems to regard as a perfectly reasonable request to make of the Wintermark generals. He is at pains to say that he has arranged for the release of all the thralls taken from Samasuak, but he confesses that this is a separate matter, one already agreed with General Osric in exchange for the Banner of the Wolf. He does not ask them to swear the oath then and there. He asks that each of them first consider what is at stake. Such an important oath is best sworn once its weight has been measured, in the presence of Solcavaris, and the people of the nation who can bear witness, better than the Jotun can. If the Wintermark generals swear an oath before the egregores and the people of Anvil, then the Fight with Honour Special Order will also prevent any Imperial army in the same territory from raiding or despoiling tombs, burial mounds and shrines to Jotun ancestors, in the same manner that it prevents certain other orders being taken. The fact that the Winterfolk are leaving sacred places of the Jotun in peace, and encouraging their allies to do the same, will be obvious to everyone in the territory. Old Bones. Questioning local thralls confirms that Mount Majestind was the final resting place of Ulven, the greatest of the Jotun ancestors. Ulven's bones are interred in the mountain along with the bones of other ancestors and many of their most valuable possessions. Any of the generals of one of the 7 Imperial armies present in Tromsø could submit an order to loot Mount Majestind. Since the Jarl of Kirheim has been careless enough to point out the precarious situation the Jotun are in, a few Imperial scouts endeavour to see if they can confirm these details, just to see what is actually at stake here. After careful questioning of local thralls, they are soon able to confirm that the mountain is widely considered to be the final resting place of Ulven, oldest and most important of all the Jotun ancestors. This legendary figure seems almost mythical on the face of it. The tales claim that Ulven founded the Jotun people, but she also defeated the gods in battle, and went on to conquer the entire world. Despite these rather preposterous tales, everyone agrees that Ulven was once a flesh and blood orc, and that her remains are definitely buried in Mount Majestind. It's not just Ulven either. The mountain is apparently the resting place of scores of ancestors. Not all of the greatest warriors are buried here, but many are, especially those of the northern Jotun. Not just their bones either. The ancestors are apparently buried with all due honours, which means their tombs will certainly contain numerous valuables, great wealth in silver, gold and gems, and at least 3 powerful artefacts. The mountain is not especially well defended. Certainly it has no special defences against an attack by an Imperial army. There is a massive kirkja on the lower slopes of the mountain, with hundreds of Ulfenvar present, which would be more than sufficient to stop a raid by military units, or by an army in the territory taking the daring raid or plunder orders. The defences are however nowhere near powerful enough to hold off a concerted attack by thousands of Imperial soldiers. Any of the 7 generals whose armies are currently present in Tromsø could issue orders to loot the mountain. They couldn't do it if they were leaving the territory, and they would have to target the region of Majestind as the one they were attempting to conquer. But providing they did so, and they were fighting in Tromsø this season, the general could order their soldiers to loot the tomb simply by including it as part of their orders. It wouldn't have any military impact, it wouldn't change the military effect of any orders issued by the general, but it would obviously be devastating for the Jotun, It would also mean that the bones, relics, and artifacts that are there would fall into the hands of the general who issued the orders. Given that the Empire does not have a map of Tromsø, it is not possible for any other Imperial army to make the attempt. Only an army that has spent 1 or more seasons campaigning in Tromsø and can reach the centre of the territory can claim the rewards of despoiling Mount Majestint. After this season, the opportunity to raid the tombs in this fashion will be lost. At the very least, Jotun will seek opportunities to reinforce the defence of the mountain, its kirkja, and its shrines. It may be possible to despoil Mount Majestint in the future, especially if the region was conquered by the Empire, but this specific opportunity is only available at the autumn equinox. Lost souls. The Jotun have arranged for the return of hundreds of thralls taken from Ser Masuak. They appear to be in good health and have been escorted to Olgafsdottir Shall by members of Jarl Kirheim's warband. Even as the Empire is invading Tromsø, the Jotun appear to be making good on a promise to return the thralls taken from Ser Masuak during the recent conquest. Those who resisted the Jotun invasion were killed, but those who took the choice became thralls. Most were forced to remain in Ser Masuak, forced to work their own lands for the Jotun who took nearly everything they produced. However, more than 1,000 were taken as thralls by the Jarls and other leaders of the Jotun and made to work their estates in Skalarn and Hordaland and beyond. The Jarl of Kirheim has apparently struck a deal with the General of the Green Shield to return the thralls. The full details are unclear, but it allegedly involves a banner, an item of worth that the Jotun greatly desired to regain. The General and the Imperial Consul made arrangements for it to be possible for the Jotun to reclaim the banner. In return, the Jarl has arranged for those who were taken from Ser Masuak to be released. It is a massive gathering of people, almost 1,000 people of all traditions. They march to Olgafsdottir Shall, accompanied by an honour guard of a score of the Jarl's warriors, but they appear to be in relatively good health. They are clothed and fed, and many are carrying tents and supplies of food that will sustain them on the journey. According to the Jotun, who are travelling with them, the group includes everyone who was taken from Ser Masuak during the Jotun invasion. Their arrival is cause for great celebrations in Olgafsdottir Shall, a chance to finally close the last chapter in the tragic tale of the Jotun conquest of Ser Masuak.